Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar. It's a second webinar of our webinar series on hiring temporary foreign workers in Canada. And we are going to talk about LMIA process and practical tips and strategies on submitting LMIA application. I would like to introduce my co-hosts. This is Owen. Owen is a part of Kirk team. He's going to take care of the technical part. Talking about the technical part, my MS team is acting up. So if I suddenly disappear, Owen and Martine will take over and I will rejoin. And Martine Varekamp-Bos, if I pronounce your last name right. Martine is an immigration consultant operating out of Red Deer. And she does a lot of agricultural LMIA applications. So she will be sharing her experience with you and will be answering the questions as well. So let's start. I talked about CARC on the first webinar. Just refresh, we are a national nonprofit organization, and we are focusing on assisting agricultural businesses in Canada with various human resource issues. We do have a number of programs and products that are being developed that will be released in upcoming weeks and months, so just stay tuned about that. The part of this webinar series is part of so-called Quality Agri-Workforce Management Program, and we are developing tools for employers to hire and manage temporary foreign workers. In addition to the webinars, we are preparing a guide for employers on temporary foreign worker file. The guide will be released in January, so we will be sending it out in our email newsletter. And we're also doing a number of e-learning training for the employers that hire temporary foreign workers that will include, for example, preventing workplace abuse or integrating foreign workers or dealing with language barriers and so on. So just keep watching on communications for us, and there will be more support coming on the temporary foreign worker program in the future. As I said, this is the second webinar of our webinar series. The webinars are conducted every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, and the next one will be conducted together with Employment and Social Development Canada, where they will be demonstrating the online portal and answering your questions related with LMIA online portal and also the job bank. This is a short bio about me. So I have over 10 years experience in global mobility immigration. I also have a license of regulated Canadian immigration consultant, but I don't practice much this year. And I joined CARC team in January 2023. And now I'm going to pass the word to Martine. She's going to introduce herself and dive into the topic.
All right, thank you, Victoria. Hi, everyone. My name is Martine. I am indeed a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I'm actually born in the Netherlands, and I came to Canada at the age of 13. Not an easy time for me, nor my parents, I would say. And I came as the child of a self-employed farmer, a dairy farm, and my husband and I actually still run this dairy farm to date. We have always had one or two foreign workers, and that's how I rolled into this work. I became a regulated Canadian immigration consultant 15 years ago and started immigration care. And a large portion of our work is focused on employment-based immigration with a specialization in agriculture. And we currently have a team of 6 here, and we assist employers from across Canada and prospective immigrants from across the globe. I understand you had a presentation last week, so I hope this is going to be a good addition to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about preparing your LMIA application with a focus on the ag stream application. And I know last week you talked about the different streams, and I will touch on that a little bit, but the focus will be on the ag stream, which I expect will be of interest to the majority of participants today. And then we have a couple questions for you. And if you can put your answers in the chat, the first one, have you ever submitted an LMIA application? And I'm very interested to hear how many have never done it. So please let us know if you've never done it, and are here really to learn about the process from the very basics and the start of the process. And if you are one of those that has submitted them before, please maybe share your biggest challenge that you've experienced. I know this can be a challenging process, but would love to hear that. And I'll kind of keep my eye out on the chat here so that I can hopefully address some of these challenges that you may have experienced. So I'll keep my eye on.
I can just read out. Yeah. So
Okay.
like a lot of people have never submitted. Chelsea never done it, but in the middle of the process and trying to find a lawyer to review what we want to submit. And Ken and Darpin, they've done it before. So never completed the application. Karen has been doing it for 11 years. Wow, you know more than we do about that. And Stacy was talking about delays, inconsistencies in the answers from different Service Canada agents. Yes, we are going to talk about assessment process, and sometimes you have to explain agents different details about agriculture that they don't know about that. Darren is very new to the process, submitted a few now, and the waiting game is the biggest hurdle for us. I would like to ask a follow-up questions to Darren. Are you submitting agricultural stream, or is it like low wage, high wage? Because agricultural stream is pretty fast right now. And Sarah has been doing the LMIA application for 7 years now. That's a lot.
All right.
Too. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. And the inconsistencies I've been doing LMIAs now for 15 years, and the inconsistencies have always been there. It can be very frustrating, and especially when it's your first LMIA. Like, we've done them now for many years, and when we see an inconsistency, we point it out to the officer. We point them to either the regulations or where the correct information is, and then they take it back to look and to verify. But the inconsistencies is 100% a frustrating piece, and it's very apparent that
There's
is
been more comments from Darren that the beekeepers was fast. I assume it was the agricultural stream, low wage we are waiting. Yes, it's over 40 business days right now, sometimes even longer. And Stacy mentioned that she received a positive LMIA, but the driver still hasn't arrived. Positive LMIA was in May. Yes, that happens. It depends on the country of origin of that driver and the processing times for his visa and work permit, like in his country of origin. And this is something that should be taken into account as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and Victoria, you touched on a good point there. Agricultural LMIAs are definitely the fastest processed LMIAs. I think most of them are processed within 2 weeks now, which is much faster than when you're looking at the low wage or the high wage stream, which those processing times are currently, it's just understanding they're going over 100 days now. So, the agricultural industry, I want to commend CARC in this as well, has actually lobbied for itself very well in getting, this priority processing and some of the exemptions that are in place. In the same sense, the agricultural stream is quite different in that it has, there's more employer responsibilities placed on the employer in terms of, transportation and housing, especially the housing one, and we'll talk about that today. So what is an LMIA? An LMIA is really permission to you, the employer, to hire a foreign national or several foreign nationals for a very defined position. And a positive LMIA confirms that no Canadians or permanent residents are available to do the job, and that there is indeed the need for a foreign worker. LMIAs can be for a seasonal position under the seasonal program, or they can also be seasonal under the regular agricultural program. And otherwise, you can ask for an employment period for up to 2 years. The high wage will be up for up to 3 years. So we'll kind of go into what I actually wanted to say before we get started on this. And I always talk to employers about this as well, is that, bringing in foreign workers, LMIA is the main way to do it. but always keep in mind there are some LMIA exemptions that that you may want to be aware of. That could be something that applies to your situation. I'm thinking of the Francophone Mobility Program for high-skilled positions, or the International Experience Canada program, which currently has 37 countries, I believe it's agreements with 37 countries under that program. But again, LMIAs are the mainstream, so that's where we're going to go with today and talk about. And so where to start? Really, where do you start? You start by determining three big things, and that is really the stream. And you talked about that last week. You've determined which is the best NOC code that fits the description of the role that you're trying to fill. And then you try to find the wage. So there's a link here to where you can find the agricultural stream wages. They are slightly different from, again, the low wage and the high wage LMIAs. Those wages can be found on the Job Bank website in their prevailing wage section. So yeah, the prevailing wage is really per industry. So there's a different one for each industry and for each province. And you will have to pay at least that wage. And if you're advertising, you have to advertise at least that wage. But first and foremost, you have to advertise, if you are advertising, the exact wage that you will be paying. But that is going to be the bottom line, that agricultural wage stream there. And then another big part is when you've determined your NOC code and you've determined your wage, and you're putting together the application. An important part of it is the business legitimacy documents. And what do these documents do? They really function two purposes. Is they want to confirm that that you're providing a goods and service that you say you are providing. And the other one, and that's a big one, is that your ability to fulfill the terms of the job offer. So if you're offering a job offer for 2 years at $20 per hour, does your business legitimacy document that you can fulfill this commitment? You have to understand that a foreign worker can't, with their work permit, they'll be connected to you. They won't be able to supplement their income by working for another employer. So it is really Service Canada. They're doing their due diligence to make sure that you are able to fulfill this commitment. So there's different documents that you can supply to as your business legitimacy documents. I would say the most common ones that we seem to be providing is the T4 summary of remuneration. So that's your payroll records. Under that one, and another one for the ability to fulfill, we're usually getting the T2 Schedule 100 and the T2 Schedule 125. And if you don't know what they are, or if you don't know where they are, ask your accountant or bookkeeper. They can probably pull them up in within the hour for you. If you don't have either of those documents, you can also look at getting an attestation from your CPA, your accountant, or your lawyer to confirm that you're providing that goods and service, or that you are and that you're actively engaged in that business, and that you can reasonably fulfill that job offer. CARC has done, actually, Victoria's done a great job in preparing these slides as well, but here is a sample of an attestation. And just recently, Service Canada actually put a link to a sample attestation on their website as well, which has been very helpful, because I find that CPA is like, well, what do you actually want me to write in this attestation? So the sample here is great. So yeah, we use these attestations regularly, and I would say that sometimes even when your application is in process and an officer who's assessing your application isn't convinced that you can reasonably meet the job offer, they may still ask for an attestation, and then you can go back to your accountant and get it as well. I feel like accountants are the most common people that write these letters, and that's my experience anyway. So another big part of your LMIA application is the dare I say, dreaded housing inspection. you know, it is a requirement that you provide one. You know, as is listed on here, the report can't be older than 8 months, which means that you're probably going to have to redo one each year. It is important that the report lists the maximum number of occupants permitted to stay there. Even for actually our own farm, we had a housing inspection, and it was actually a house with three bedrooms. And I told the inspector we're having 2 foreign workers stay here, and then she actually approved the accommodation for 2 people and put that in the report. So I advise employers now, and here's my practical tip for you, is to request for the inspector to approve it for the maximum number of occupants. Especially if you're housing them in a secondary farmhouse. I'm not saying that you should do that and you know, use it to the maximum number of occupancy, but it does create flexibility, especially if you're having foreign workers who are bringing over their family members, and you are subject to an inspection later on in this LMIA process, which ESDC will speak to, I think, in a couple of weeks. Then at least, you know, you're good with saying, yes, this family of 4 is living here, but my housing was indeed inspected for 4. So yeah, you can submit a housing inspection report that has a pass, but you still have to meet certain conditions. But by the time that the officer assesses your application, you should have, you know, complied with those conditions. Some other practical tips or some other things to think about as well is that if you are, is really in terms of offsite and onsite housing, your requirements around how much you can charge in rent is different. So for on-site housing, you're only allowed to charge under the agricultural stream, $30 per week in rent, and you are not allowed to collect utilities and that type of stuff. And then if you're doing offsite, it gets tricky when depending on the NOC. If you're doing the lower skilled ones, it is still offsite $30 per week. If you're hiring somebody as a farm supervisor or a farm manager, so the higher skilled, you can actually collect up to 30%, or you have to make up to 30% of their wages, monthly income in rent, or, you know, if they're paying a third party, you have to make sure that it's within that 30%. The interesting one here is NOC 84120. And NOC 81420 actually comprises of 2 positions. It comprises of farm equipment operators and specialized livestock workers, like your cattle herdspersons, for example. So your specialized livestock workers fall then under the skilled occupations, in that you can charge that, you know, you've got to make sure that rent is no more than 30%. Yet your farm equipment operators are treated as the low skilled workers are, and you can only charge $30 per week in rent. It is just a distinction that's you know, important to pick up on if you're dealing with those particular occupations. And then I appreciate that you put this on the slide here, Victoria, is that employers who are using commercial accommodations 3-star or above are actually not required to submit a housing inspection report.
There is a question from Sarah. Okay. Just to confirm, with the low wage on site, you cannot charge any utilities? Question mark.
No. Yeah, that is my understanding of that. And I would say, you know, another thing about housing inspections that's important to note here is that the foreign worker doesn't need to live in the housing that you are providing. They can live elsewhere. If they've got family or they want to live elsewhere, they are free to do that. There is, however, you are still required to provide that accommodation. So you are still required to provide a housing inspection report. And really this is because, you know, let's say this foreign worker, they're, you know, they get kicked out of their house or their house burns down or what have you, their other accommodation falls through, you are still obligated to provide that housing for them.
Yeah.
There is some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, there are some comments coming, like Kelly. I think it's the opposite. Can't charge rent, but can charge recoverable costs to help recover costs of utilities. Can you comment on that, Martine?
Okay, you know what, Kelly, I would have to look into that. Like, my understanding is that you can't, but there might be some leeway there. And yeah, I can look into that and get back to you to confirm that.
Yeah, and Diane said she didn't know you can charge rent to agricultural workers. Is it the same for non-agricultural workers?
Yes, like the non-agricultural workers, like, you are not necessarily required to provide this housing in the same sense with a housing inspection report. But if you're providing accommodation to non-agricultural workers, you can charge them rent. For low wage, you have to make sure that whatever they're paying in rent is less than 30% of their income.
And I also would like to add, on our previous webinar, there was a question about upcoming changes in housing inspection or housing requirements for foreign workers, especially in Ontario and Alberta. So I did my own research. Nothing has changed since 2018 on the website. But yes, there was a consultation like with a number of employers, and there was a survey to the foreign workers in terms of accommodation. And as a result, the government wanted to bring the standards to kind of same bottom line, and they are going to use the standards from Ontario, BC, and Alberta as the bottom line. The changes were supposed to be announced in 2022, but nothing has announced yet. I also reached out to our contact with ESDC. So yes, there is a working group on that, but once there is an information that can be shared to the public, we will definitely share it in our newsletter. I also found a very comprehensive like standards or guide on housing from Ontario. So if someone is interested in that, I can send a link on that as well. And we'll move further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the proof of workplace safety insurance. So this depends on you have to be consistent with whatever is required in your province. From my experience over the last few years with LMIAs is that officers are not placing as much emphasis on it, now as they were a couple of years ago or before COVID. I would say they were always looking for proof in their applications. You don't have to supply proof, but you do need to acknowledge that you have workplace insurance, and whether that is through your provincial, WCB body, or whether you're getting private insurance. When you are getting private insurance, it is important that it is effective from the first day. The same goes, and for health insurance. In some provinces, foreign workers are eligible for provincial health care from the day of arrival. In some provinces, they are not. So then you have to provide alternative insurance, and it needs to be effective from the first day of work. That's an important thing to note, because many of your benefits programs often don't kick in until 3 months. So that basic insurance, you need to have something in place from day one. So I think we've got that covered there. The recruitment and advertising, we can move on to that, Victoria. So yeah, again, I think this was effective lobbying by the industry. There has been a suspension of the advertising requirements for agricultural positions. It'll be interesting to see if that suspension will be extended again. It's been extended now numerous times. That being said, you're still being encouraged to advertise. So, you are still more than welcome to conduct the advertising, and I would say that it is recommended. Job Bank, of course, is the one place where, that, Service Canada would recommend, and you're going to be talking about Job Bank next week. Some best practice tips really is when you do your advertising, you're probably going to get a lot of responses from overseas, or probably from overseas. Creating a dedicated email address just for this purpose of advertising is going to, one, keep your own inbox a lot cleaner, and second, when you have to report on the number of applicants, which is what you do have to do under the low wage and the high wage applications, you then can filter a little bit better and report on them. And you are expected for those low wage and high wage applications, you are expected to follow up with applicants who meet the minimum requirements of the job and provide a reason as to why you didn't hire them. When you're creating your ad, what I do is I create the job bank ad is my foundation. It just meets all their, all ESDC's, touch points that they want. And then I essentially copy and paste it and put it onto, the other sources. It is a pretty dry ad. So in the other sources, if you wanted to add something to, make it speak more or make the job and, speak more about your type of business, please feel free to do so, but stick to that essence of whatever is in the job bank ad, just because, that meets the basic requirements. Where to advertise, I always suggest doing a bit more than the bare minimum, just in case, one of your ads is rejected, or, and you're just presenting a more convincing case of that you're genuinely trying to hire Canadians or permanent residents first. And before I forget, I should mention that you have an advertising requirement for this high wage and low wage LMIAs of 4 weeks. And one ad should continue to be active while your LMIA application is in process. So please make sure that you keep that ad going and take screenshots of your advertising, definitely at the start and at the end. And, if you're worried about not getting it, maybe do it intermittently to prove that your advertising was indeed active. And your job ad is, and I think that's our next slide here, is very important in that it really becomes the foundation of your LMIA application. And whatever you put on here are going to be the terms and conditions of how you're going to be employing this foreign worker. So, once down the line, if you are one of the lucky ones that gets subject to the compliance review, it is essentially going to be compared to what's in your LMIA, which is based on what you put in here. And in terms of, the qualifications and requirements, don't exceed what is in the NOC, unless you really have solid justification for it. I generally recommend not to exceed any of the requirements that are listed in the NOC. You are going to have to explain it, and they are, you're going to have a much easier process if you are staying within that NOC list of requirements.
Yeah, as an example, I want to add, for the qualification or education requirements, sometimes employers would like to put high school diploma when hiring a general farm worker, and this is not a part of the NOC, so it could be justifiable if you are dealing with the equipment, with GPS, and you're looking for someone who is a computer literate and you need, so that if you do that, you need to be able to provide reasonable explanation. And there was also a question from Sarah. Do you need to report the number of temporary foreign workers that apply from outside of Canada?
No, you do not. No, you're in those applications for low wage and high wage applications, you are reporting on the number of Canadian and permanent residents, applicants, and then you're reporting on how many you contacted and how many you interviewed and then how many you hired. Yeah, and it is actually important, and this is a good point to point out here as well. So the number of positions that you are putting in your ad cannot, it must match what you're, or not, it doesn't need to match, but it can't be, if you're advertising one position and then you're going to be applying for an LMIA for 2 people, you're going to be questioned. Really, you should be advertising the number of vacancies right away in that ad, and it should at least match, or or the number of vacancies in your ad should be higher than what you're requesting.
There was a comment from Diane, wouldn't that change the worker's salary if this is about the education? Not sure. And Kelly also made a comment, a question, as far as recruiting Canadians and PR, are you required to offer the job to any Canadian or PR, general farm labor in the ag industry, that applies to the ad, or can you apply general screening measures such as person showing a history of leaving their jobs like every few months.
Yeah, so that is, as soon as you get into more subjective reasons as to why you're not hiring somebody, it becomes I would say, harder to defend that you can't find that the Canadians and permanent residents aren't there. Because what Service Canada officer is it might be saying to you is like, look, if they are applying, then the labor shortage is not your concern. You should be working on your retention strategies, and then I'm sure they have another program that they can refer you to. So you really want to, if at all possible, if you want to look at the applicants, and if they are not meeting the base requirements in terms of education or experience, those would be the preferred ways to say these ones are not qualified. I'm not saying that any other reasons don't work, but you might be asked more questions about it as to why. I know I've had before where employers have had, previous employees that weren't working out and they were applying again, and then you can speak to that.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, if your like requirements in your ad that the worker must have, say, at least 1 year experience or experience operating farming equipment, and you have Canadians that are applying and they don't show this experience. For example, it's a Canadian on PR who has worked in the like service industry or Tim Hortons in the past. This is a legitimate reason like not to hire this individual because he doesn't meet your requirements. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yes. You've summed that up very well.
There is also a question from Stacy or comment. I was told by a Service Canada agent for soap workers that I had to put in high school diploma.
Yeah, like I guess it would depend on what the type of occupation was. What you have to keep in mind also is that whatever you're putting in that ad, and what is going to be placed on that LMIA, the foreign worker that you're hiring is going to also have to meet those conditions. So if you're putting on there, I want them to have a high school diploma, then your foreign worker is going to have to prove in their work permit application that they have high school. If you're asking for, 1 or 2 years of experience in that work permit application, the foreign worker is going to have to, supply sufficient proof that they do meet those 2 years or whatever you've asked for in terms of work experience requirements. So it's important that you're thinking about this right away when you're putting this ad together. Like the foreign worker also needs to meet these requirements. So setting a high bar might complicate things and later in getting, a foreign worker that you've selected who may not have high school but maybe has 15 years of experience, for example.
Yeah, I'm still like curious with Stacy, like why like a soap worker, which is probably like a seasonal harvesting labor, is required to have a high school, and whether Service Canada agent explained why. But yeah, like this NOC doesn't require high school. Like,
no, and you know what,
want to go back to the basics.
Yeah, and that might have been a case of, sometimes asking the officer to justify why they're asking you to do that, and then getting them to, point you to where that's maybe in writing. There has actually been many times where I've had officers where I've actually told them, well, actually, I think you're incorrect, and I would send them the information, and then they would take it up with the supervisor, and they would then accept what I was requesting. So and we're getting into that with our next slide here, is that
can we just get a comment from Diane? Like, if you can read it, maybe it would be easy. It's a long one. So
if the work, like I'm just glancing over the question here, but if the work location changes, you would have to then inform Service Canada after the LMIA has been approved. That's if I'm reading the question correctly. And then you have to request a modification to the LMIA. And requesting a modification to the LMIA, and I think Service Canada will touch on this, or ESDC, when they do the presentation with you, and it will be good questions for them. But there are minor modifications which will be accepted, and there are major modifications. But one of the first things they will look at if you're requesting such a modification is that wage still applicable in that region?
And for the wage, say like 18, like there was a comment, if the wage is 18 per hour and you are requesting operating equipment and so on, more experience, would they require employer to pay the workers more? So the bottom line, you need to pay the wage that is determined by ESDC. And in the agricultural stream, there are wage tables, like we provided a link to that. If it's a low wage, you need to pay at least the median wage for this occupation for your economic region in your province. If you say you would like to hire 2 workers, one for 18 with no experience and another one with some experience, then yes, it needs to be 2 different advertisements and 2 different LMIAs as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Oh, and Stacy just said that it circles back to the Service Canada agents have very inconsistencies. I'll ask the questions and they're just not overly helpful. I do state no experience. Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah. And then Service Canada. Sometimes like I would always recommend to like kind of start telling about your operation and about your farm. Where are you? What do you grow? And so on, just to get them familiarized with your operation, and hopefully they will understand it better.
Yeah, and I want to kind of circle back to Diane's question or comments there. If you are asking for more experience, especially than maybe what's standard in the NOC description, if you can justify it, part of your justification also needs to be reflected in the wage. So if you're asking for more, then you probably should, and as a best practice tip, also be paying more than what was the prevailing wage rate for that position.
Yeah, and also with the wage, it needs to be consistent with the wage you're currently paying to your local employees. If you are looking to hire a foreign worker with 2 years experience and you have like a Canadian permanent resident with 2 years of experience in the job, like that has the same qualifications, you need to pay temporary foreign worker the same amount as you're paying to your Canadian or permanent resident. If it makes sense.
They call that the substantially the same test that they conduct on applications, and you really should be treating foreign workers indeed the same as you are treating your Canadian workers. That question that you're alluding to, Victoria, that is on the application is worded very awkwardly. And it's worded like as this foreign worker being paid the same as Canadians with the same experience and the same responsibilities. It's a lot of like, most foreign workers aren't exactly the same as your current employees.
They don't have Canadian experience, right?
No, so it's I often answer that question if I can. I answer it no, because they aren't really the same. But yeah, it's again one to be mindful of. If you are answering that and that wage is very different from what you're offering that foreign worker, you will be asked questions about it during your assessment.
Okay, now we do the assessment.
Yeah. So I think the big part what I share with our employers about the assessment process is that it is a process. It is, or it can be a process, let's put it that way. It is back and forth between you and the officer. I wouldn't go as far that it is a negotiation, but there is back and forth of information sharing. Things in the application can be changed, not in your job ads. That's historical data that can't be changed, but things in your application can be changed. And officers, I guess it depends a little bit on who you're getting, but some can be helpful. And I would love to hear of some good experiences that you've had with officers too in the chat. They sometimes they do work with you and they provide you with that guidance and that education piece. So once you've prepared your application, you've done it online because that's how they want it now. You've uploaded all their documents, your business legitimacy documents, you've addressed the workplace insurance, you've provided a housing inspection. What is next? So typically, most employers get an email from an officer where the officer wants to schedule a call with the employer. So during that call, they will ask you some questions, and some officers actually don't call you anymore. They put these questions in an email, which can be helpful because then you can, take your time to answer them and feel maybe less trapped, which I feel some employers sometimes feel a bit trapped during this call or backed into a corner. It's important that when you have this call, you have a copy of the application in front of you so that you can provide consistent information. And really what an officer is doing, an officer has to show they've done their due diligence in assessing these applications. So they're just making sure that, you know, what you presented is correct and that you are aware of, you know, the responsibilities that you've agreed to. So that's I think the big thing of what, you know, happens during this assessment process. Just see here what else. The language requirements is always an interesting one, again, for agricultural applications. It's the only one where you can justify that they don't speak or read, you know, any English or French. They again look at, you know, the genuineness of the job offer. Does this fit with your business needs? Are you, you know, a small, cattle farm, and are you requesting an accountant? That might not make any sense, you know. So they're looking at, you know, how genuine is this job offer. I get that question sometimes about hiring family members, and you can still hire a family member, but again, this genuineness may be looked at a bit more if they become aware it is a family member. But, you know, you can still hire family members as long as it fits within, the genuineness of the job offer. They will look at if you've had previous temporary foreign workers, have you had compliance issues in the past? If you've had compliance issues in the past, you probably will receive some additional questions to make sure that you are now compliant. And the one thing that we didn't really talk about yet is transportation. As part of the LMIA application, you are required for agricultural ones and for low-wage one to provide transportation for the foreign worker from, you know, their current place of residence to your place of work. So that goes beyond, you know, technically it goes beyond buying a flight from, you know, Mexico City to Calgary. Like, you're really supposed to pay that, you know, wherever they're living in Mexico, the bus fare to Mexico City. And you know, if you're getting them to public transportation, Alberta's not that great. They can't get a bus, but they'd have to probably get a cab or something like that. If that were the case, that you'd be responsible for those fees as well. You cannot reimburse these costs or recoup these costs through the temporary foreign worker. They should be paid upfront. And I suggest that you keep proof of that as well, so that, you know, if you're ever audited, you can clearly demonstrate that you have paid for that travel. Also, day-to-day travel to and from the farm is part of the requirement. So especially for offsite accommodation, you need to make sure that you're providing transportation so that they can get, you know, to and from work, whether that's, you know, and that can take, it hasn't really specified what that looks like. Providing this transportation, it just says day-to-day transportation is the responsibility of the employer. So whether that's, you know, a ride, like you get picked up by another co-worker, you know, again, that's not specified to great extent. I think it would be a great question for the ESDC officers, what they mean by that. Does that mean you're supplying a car? Do you have to pay for fuel? I think those are some great questions you could ask them. Maybe you should have me on the call and I can ask those questions.
Yeah. There is a question from Caleb whether he needs to fill out the recruitment section of LMIA if they primary agriculture and they're exempt.
Yeah, no, you don't. You just put in there, advertising exemption in place or not applicable. So what I put on those ones.
And Kelly asked, did you say employer is responsible to pay for transportation to airport?
Yeah, they are supposed to provide to do that. Yeah. From their current place of residence to the location of work.
And the place of residence is also mentioned in the employment contract, so location, right?
Yeah. So actually that brings up an interesting point now, Victoria, especially for those that have been doing LMIA applications for some time. The employment contract used to be an essential document of the LMIA application. You actually now don't need to put it in there anymore. So, you can make your own decision whether you want to put that contract in or not. The same requirements, are in place around transportation that is otherwise addressed in that contract. As a best practice, I do usually put them in there because employers or employees or temporary foreign workers are going to need a copy of this employment contract. It is one of the employer's responsibility to make sure that they have a copy of their contract. So if you have it, prepared up front, it's been assessed, that it will stand for this program.
And Kelly is also asking, what if the worker is going on vacation and it's not the end of the contract?
Yeah, you don't have to pay for transportation then. That's their own choice. Your commitment is really at the beginning of the contract and at the end of the contract. If the contract ends sooner because of maybe it's your decision or it's their decision, you are responsible for their travel. If they are going to a different employer, that responsibility could be transferred to the next employer. But if you're not sure, again, a best practice tip is just to give that foreign worker, give them a ride to the airport, give them the ticket. You can't make them get on the plane, but you have provided all the means for that person to leave Canada, and you've complied with the conditions of the LMIA. Another question that I get sometimes is if a foreign worker comes with family, if you have to provide transportation for the family. No, you don't have to do that. I'm sure you can, but it's not your obligation, and your agreement is with the foreign worker, not with the family.
And there is also a question from Diane. If the worker is on vacation and entered Canada to work in Nova Scotia, can the worker go to other provinces to visit friends and family with their visa? Are there any restrictions?
No, they can definitely travel within Canada without concern. The visa, I guess this kind of goes beyond the scope of the LMIAs, but the visa that we placed in their passport, if they're from a visa required country, is really to facilitate entry into Canada. But once you're in Canada, you can travel freely.
One thing I'd like to also mention or remind about the assessment process is compliance with federal and provincial agreements. And we talked about it on the webinar number 1. That was about the provincial registration, because certain provinces require now employers to be registered with the provincial immigration authorities before hiring foreign workers. And this is in BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So if you're in those provinces, you need to start with your provincial registration, and you need to submit the proof of your registration with your LMIA application. Otherwise, it will be returned or considered incomplete or even refused.
Yeah, that's an important consideration, and especially in BC, it's taking a long time to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like Manitoba and Saskatchewan it's pretty quickly, but BC is very very backed up. Another thing that, and I'm gonna lead into more compliance things, but you really want to be super mindful of what you're putting in your application, that you are prepared to do and are going to comply with all those conditions. And that includes, if the prevailing wage rate goes up while you're employing that foreign worker, you should be increasing that accordingly. So, as a best practice tip, reviewing the wages annually or more frequently would probably be better, and then adjusting the wage. You are required to do that. So yeah, be very mindful of that compliance piece, and you can do kind of self audits, if you will, and some things that are typically looked for are timesheets, and payroll pay stubs, a copy of the work permit, proof of insurance. Those things are going to be a base requirement for almost any audit, and an up-to-date job description is good to have as well. That is, ideally consistent with what's in your LMIA. And if you're noticing inconsistencies, review the minor modifications section on the ESDC website to see if it falls within that. And otherwise, you might want to reach out to ESDC and see if it falls within a modification that they can accommodate without you having to reapply.
Yeah. And yes, there is a comment that BC is now 3 months. Yes. And I just shared a link in the chat with this guide for accommodation. So like it is in like one of the health regions in Ontario, but it's like very explanatory and like really lots of useful information.
Okay.
Transportation that is used to transport the workers from housing to fields, do they have to be inspected?
No, no. Like and like I said, that the wording on day-to-day transportation is literally like a line and a half on the ESDC website. It's not, there's not a lot of detail there. So what they mean by it is, you know, it seems to be open to interpretation, but it does not say anything about transportation.
And there is another question. For a 2-year extreme worker, you decide to renew. Are you obligated to pay for their flight home at the end of each 2-year contract, even though you're extending their work permit or just when the employment relationship has ended? This has always been a gray area for us.
Yeah, so no, you don't have to. Once you're extending their employment, you're extending that from a 2-year term to a 4-year term. So then you're committing to paying that return flight at the end of that 4-year term.
Yeah. And if the worker decides to go back home for vacation, that's their own expenses.
That's their own decision to do so, yeah.
And if you're renewing a 2-year worker for another 2-year, maybe it's time to think about PR opportunities for this worker as well.
Yeah, fair point.
Well, this is the end of our webinar. Like, we still have 7 minutes more to take any more questions, and there is a contact information shared on the slide. We will be sending the recording and the PowerPoint presentation closer to the end of this week. We'll see.
There's a couple questions there,
Yeah.
there, Victoria. I see that Chelsea is asking what the maximum duration is that you are allowed to have a temporary foreign worker. So for a while that was restricted to 4 years. That is not in place. You can essentially extend a foreign worker for, for infinity. So there is no specific guideline on that. You may at some point get questioned about whether this is truly, a temporary fix, and maybe you want to look at permanent residency and the intent of the foreign worker who comes for temporary need, but is really, he might have actually get issues with, I'm going to say he or she might have issues with extending their work permit, about their, their purpose of their stay. Is it indeed temporary or is it now permanent?
Yeah. I just have some comments, and if you feel like to comment in the chat, that would be great. I feel like we may need to think about the webinar of transitioning temporary foreign workers into PRs at some point, maybe like later in January. Like, let us know in chat if this is something that you would be interested in. And if you still feel like there is a requirement or you need more information on low wage, high wage, because it's a bit different. Not so many exemptions, let us know as well. And we may think about putting content for that as well. Transitioning for sure. Yes. Housing offsite, how do we prove that it's affordable? The lower mainland in BC isn't affordable anywhere.
Yeah, so there isn't, that's also a good point. You're really committing to it, but I haven't really seen a whole lot of where officers are really following up on it. You're committing to it, so you're responsible to do that. And it could be in the event of a compliance review where they're going to be asking more information about this. I have actually also not seen that it's come up in compliance reviews just yet. But it may be the case. And, it's a very fair point that it's in some parts of Canada, it's no longer affordable. And I would say that you as an employer, do your due diligence on this and check in with your foreign workers if they are living in accommodation, and check in with them what they're paying for rent to make sure that it is within that 30% if that's the requirement that you're under. And otherwise you look at subsidizing that for them.
Yeah, like as a part of, say, like low wage, employers need to make sure there is housing available, affordable. Some employers would even put like screenshots of the ads from Kijiji just to see that there is housing available in the area and this is the cost. Like that's in the areas where it's more affordable than BC.
Yeah. So, and I've actually done that in the past. I haven't put that in there for years, and I've never been asked about, can you supply some proof that affordable accommodation is indeed in available? But even for your own sake, it would be good to do, right? Just to do that quick,
Yeah.
online search and putting that evidence into the application.
There is a question from Trevor. How can an employer find out when a temporary foreign worker receives an open permit or PR and are no longer under the LMIA? Sometimes the worker wants to stay in the housing or have other benefits of being a temporary foreign worker, and they may not inform the employer.
Yeah, so especially if they become a permanent resident, Trevor, they have a new social insurance number. So you would need that, and you would know that they're no longer, and foreign workers social insurance numbers start with a 9. If it no longer starts with a 9, you know that they're permanent resident, and then yes, your requirements to them, your obligations to them would change. I would make sure that you agree with the foreign worker that you obviously get a copy of their work permit, and you have them commit to, if your work permit changes, because that's again your obligation to have those documents on file to make sure that they're authorized to work for you. So if that authorization to work for you document changes, you need to have it in your files, and yeah, you'll have to compel the foreign workers to provide you with that updated information.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly just mentioned that would love to hear the benefits of why the PR is something a firm should encourage. So we can touch base on that in the next webinar. It's just like for the employers that are especially hiring like for like full-time, not seasonal positions. Why do you need to do an LMIA every 2 years, right? And the workers from certain countries would like to come over here, would like to bring their families. So if it works for both employer and the worker, this probably is a reasonable way to go.
Yeah, I actually, before we close, maybe I'll close on that one, because transitioning temporary foreign workers to permanent residency and helping helping them bring over their families as an employer, and as an employer of temporary foreign workers ourselves, can be an incredibly rewarding process. And I really do see it as an opportunity that we've presented. And I think I've got like 4 or 5 of our foreign workers in mind, and that we've helped over the years. 2 are still there. They're permanent. Actually, 3 are still there. They're permanent residents now. And it's been an incredibly rewarding experience to see their kids just, be able to go to school here, do sports, and just be part of, our fabric. They sit on the bus with our kids and their friends, and it's pretty cool. So that's a different side of it, and less maybe business oriented, but on a greater scale, it's been very rewarding to be part of that.
So we'll
providing that opportunity.
2 more questions, and
Yeah.
From my understanding through SOP, we are provided employees from their government. What is the timeline for getting an LMIA approval to booking flights for the workers?
Oh, Caleb, I don't know actually what the exact timeline is on that. Do you know that, Victoria?
I can mention depends where you're located, Caleb, if you're in BC or in Ontario. Like with BC, SOAP is done through Valley and they work with the agent, or you're in Manitoba. Okay. That's a good question then. So I would say that LMIA approval for SOAP is still like under 2 weeks, like 10 business days, even less. And for booking the flight for the workers, once you have attached the name of the worker to the LMIA, you can start booking the flight. Again, it needs to be according to your requirements, because with SOAP, there is only certain time when the workers can come over. And if for some reason you have any questions or issues with that, I still recommend maybe to talk to farms. They're based in Ontario and they administer the SOAP program for Ontario, and they will be able to help you with the travel agent as well. And the last question from Diane, can our admin prepare the LMIA paperwork and work with the offices to hire foreign workers?
Yes, if they have the authorization from the business owners to do that, yes, they can. They do need to be, this is where it gets tricky, and this is going to be for your next session in Job Bank and the LMIA portal. They do need to be registered as a user in Job Bank to add them to the LMIA application as the person to be contacted.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. That was a lot of information and lots of great questions. We hope we helped you at least a bit. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar next Tuesday. And I will talk to Martine about another webinar for transitioning to PR as well. So thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.